Ryan Honeyman, Lyft partner at Lyft Economy. So Lyft is an impact consulting firm whose mission is to create, model, and share a locally self-reliant economy that works for the benefit of all life. The way I got into B Corps was, through talking to companies about sustainability and, how that they can make a positive impact. And there's a lot of folks who have a lot of questions, as you know, Greg, from the B Corp movement. People are always like, what does that mean? How do I become one? And so the B Corp Handbook was my attempt to codify some of the thinking and sort of make it into one easily accessible thing that people could learn, what B Corps are, why they matter, and how you can use business as a force for good.
And now it's time for the boiling point takeaways.
One thing, Dave, as a takeaway after speaking with Ryan, is we have been brought up in a homogeneous culture here in Atlantic Canada. Not you, right. Because you were up north, and so you had a different level of multiculturalism in the north. And but here, growing up in St. John, it's been so having these conversations of racial injustice and income inequality and anti-racism has never been right in front of my eyes growing up. But it's taken me getting into business and then jumping into these communities and having these conversations to get me really excited about participating in the positive change that we as an economy have to make.
Yeah, well, and there's all these uncomfortable truths that might exist, and I never really had a chance to talk about it, but I on some level, it would be nice to have more diversity in this conversation, in terms of if we're going to talk about racial injustice, like three white guys talking about it. There is a level of awkwardness for me around that.
Well, just like what Ryan said.
Yeah, exactly. So, But my takeaway would be just I'm going to say I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Ryan's, passion for, maybe having uncomfortable conversations and knowing that there's a community out there who wants to do the right things and addressing, what came before us and recognizing that does impact how we make decisions and how we see the world. And, and there's no simple answer to all this. But I appreciate the conversation and just, it's just conversation. It's a conversation people aren't having, and it's nice to have it. Yeah, I want to make it more comfortable on some level.
Well, I love the uncomfort. Like, it's great. Like, I'm uncomfortable with it too, of course, but it's that means it's an important discussion. And one thing I was going to ask Ryan, I guess this is part of my takeaway too, is especially lately in this particular community, in this conversation, I hear what you just said a lot, like, oh, we're just three white guys. But maybe we need to shift that to saying, yes, three white guys need to be wrestling with this and discussing it and taking it apart. Because if we're too afraid to talk about it because, oh, we're three white guys or four white guys or five white guys talking about it, if we don't have the conversation, is that better? So I think it's really important. And yes, we need to continue to bring the diversity into that conversation. But in this moment where you and I think it's brilliant to get uncomfortable with it and then invite people in. I'm talking to the audience right now listening to us. How are all of you dealing with this discussion? We'd like to hear from you on that, because it's a critical conversation we have to have, even if you're in a homogeneous community.
Yeah, no, and you know what it means? Actually, to be honest, if I was to clarify that more succinctly, I would say it's the appearance of us having this conversation in a fishbowl would be less than us having the conversation. I'm good. I like having the conversation. I'm interested in the conversation.
Yeah.
I want my kids to be, and I'm concerned that my kids there's not enough diversity in the schools they're attending. I think that's so important. And that's not just racial diversity, that's income diverse, like kids coming from all different socioeconomic status. It's, if you grow up and everyone has an Xbox and everyone has 2 cars, and how can you possibly relate? Like, I know, when we come uptown sometimes with my daughter, who's got this really wonderful way of looking at the world, but she's just so surprised to see a panhandler. Like, what's that person doing? What's going on? And so it's a great opportunity to talk about that. But then I realized, oh my God, she doesn't see this hardly ever unless we, come in from the valley. And is that like, that's not good for her. She needs to see more of this, because that's the reality for a lot of people, of not necessarily panhandling, but not having, kind of some of the things that we take for granted. So anyways, I just find, I just think there's so much value, and that's why I love travel. And, particularly when I was younger, you get to be exposed to so many, like going to see, Vietnam and how people live, or Tibet, or, totally. Places in Europe, or places in your own community that you wouldn't necessarily see. It's just such good exposure, and gives you perspective.
And I guess just the closing point for me is, it's uncomfortable having these conversations as people. It's even more comfortable as businesses. But I think if you can lead your business internally and then externally on these conversations, big, powerful changes can happen. And we're starting to see it. It's incredible seeing how the business community is tackling these issues. So great food for thought, and probably the longest takeaways that we've had ever, Dave. So congratulations, Ryan.
Okay. Maybe I'll have the final say if I could. I would say kudos to you and Ryan for being ambassadors of the movement and creating the conversation. So well done. And you, I know there's a big investment of time, energy, money in supporting this and trying to get this some solutions.
Yeah, awesome, Dave. And thanks for what you're doing with $1 Million Pledge, and invite me into that. That's been awesome. We'll see you next week, my friend.
All right, buddy.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Boiling Point. Thanks for listening, and remember, keep that pot boiling.